Hey guys, how are you? My name is Manuel and welcome to Aviation. And today we're going to talk about a very important factor, a factor that most pilots are very afraid to encounter, but even though they still rarely encounter that situation, and that situation is called the stall, which basically means that the aircraft falls out of the sky. So how does an aircraft actually find itself in a stall? What are the conditions of that happening? And how can you recover from the stall if you're already in? Stay tuned to the end to find out. So first of all, let's actually define a stall in a more scientific way. A stall is a condition when an aircraft loses lift and control. In other words, it just can't fly, and as I said before, it'll just fall out of the sky and the wings will be completely useless at that point. So now that we have the stall figured out, what are the normal causes? Well, normally it actually occurs when the angle of attack of the wing exceeds the critical angle of attack, which is the angle at which the airfoil generates maximum lift. If it's already above that, if it's already above that angle, it'll find itself in a stall. But for those that don't know, what is an angle of attack? The angle of attack is the angle between the wing chord and the direction of the airflow. The more separate they are, the higher the angle of attack. And basically, when the angle of attack is higher, the airspeed is causing more and more drag because it's hitting the aircraft. It's hitting the aircraft more than it's lifting it. Of course, there's some air flowing through the aircraft, but it'll come at a point where the aircraft will be really, really slow and the angle of attack will be really, really high until the aircraft eventually loses the speed and control. So, how does an aircraft recover from a stall? Well, there are many ways the aircraft can recover from a stall, and it mostly depends on the aircraft variant, such as if it's an Airbus or Boeing, etc. But in general, that is for every single aircraft that exists. In general, when you're flying, when you find yourself in a situation of a stall, first of all, you have to avoid the temptation of starting full thrust. But why? If it actually increases speed, the issue is that thrust also increases the pitch, and the pitch actually affects more the speed than the altitude, and that is why you should never touch the thrust control. You should never touch the thrust control, and what you should do is hold the nose down. If you hold the nose down, the aircraft will efficiently gain more speed, and it'll lose some altitude, yes, of course, but you're recovering from a stall. It's your only situation. You have to rely on gravity. You have to rely on gravity. So that is why you point the nose down until you reach what is considered the minimum speed at which the aircraft can rotate at a normal takeoff, and you slowly and gently pull over the nose. Unless if you're about to crash over the ground, of course, but we're not talking about that. And yeah, so but what if you're actually at a low altitude? Because if you're at a high altitude, well, yeah, you have plenty of time. You don't need to react quickly or anything. But what if you're at a low altitude, say 2,000 feet? Well, that is an issue. I get it. That is an issue, and it's especially an issue because it mostly happens if you're at landing or if you're taking off, which is what happened in 2009 with the Sully incident and the miracle of the Hudson, where it couldn't just dive, and the aircraft couldn't just dive over the area because it would crash. It would have to glide down towards eventually the river, but yeah, the point is that you can't just dive if you're at a low altitude. But you have no other choice because the most important thing is to gain lift, and if you gain lift, you gain altitude, is and that is why it's the main priority, the super main priority. You have to forget about anything else. You have to concentrate on saving the aircraft other than the altitude. and that is why you have no other choice but to push over the nose. Not too much, but you have to make some control. But what I said before about the about each aircraft behaving differently about stalls was simply because each aircraft has certain mechanisms, such as alarms. Every aircraft has one. It normally says something like stall, stall, or it normally says in the Boeing it says airspeed low. In the Airbus, I forgot about that. You can remind me in the comments. And oh yeah, every single aircraft has their alarms, and there could be one that it doesn't, but that would be like a recreational aircraft or a small aircraft that isn't that necessary for the airspeed. But basically, in Boeing, it has what is called the stick shaker. The stick shaker is on the yoke, and it happens that if you're holding over the yoke, and basically, if you're losing airspeed, the alarms will sound, and then it would and then the basically the yoke, as the name suggests, the stick shaker, it would just shake all the way down automatically to put the nose down and gain some airspeed if it's actually too low. That is what Boeing actually has in mind, and it has worked for many times in many years, and it has prevented quite a lot of accidents. And also Airbus has its own systems, but I don't really know what they really are. So, and it's not even that important for now. So if you don't mind, I would appreciate it if you correct that in the comment section. And yeah, that is the main principle of what should you do if you find yourself in a stall, and that is what the famous incidents of the Boeing 737 Max that actually tragically crashed after takeoff. That is what actually happened. What the aircraft was actually thinking. It thought it lost speed, and that is why the MCAS, which is a brand new system Boeing has implemented into its airplanes, which basically means that the elevator trim, which is the pitch trim or the neutral position of the yoke in the vertical position, actually goes all the way down just to gain gain as much airspeed as possible and lowering the nose as much as it can. That is what MCAS is all about. But there was a little bit of a complication over there that I'm not gonna talk about. It's for another video. But now you know what should you do if you find yourself in the stall. So we've now figured out what happens if you're in a stall. But now, how is it even possible that you're gonna find yourself in one? Like you're mostly the airspeed indicator is what you're paying attention 90% of the time. Well, you see, every human has the tendency to concentrate on something else that isn't really that necessary, and which is and not even part of the flight. And that is why you have to not only implement alarms into your aircraft, which is in relative to the aircraft manufacturers, and also you have to know what you're doing in case you find yourself in the worst case scenario, which is something that every pilot needs to consider and for obviously for their training. But in general, the main conditions of from a stall are in takeoff and landing. But why in those places? How can it just happen in cruise? Well, in cruising altitude, it's definitely possible, and I won't forget that. But it's just that in takeoff and landing, you have the lowest speed, or in other words, the highest angle of attack for the entire flight. And that is where a stall might actually happen if something really bad were to occur. That is a reason why every single aircraft, there could be a exception such as the Concorde, every single aircraft has what they call the flaps, which is the things that go down back to the wing, and the only thing they do is to not only increase drag for the landing, but they also increase lift. And when they increase lift, it decreases the angle of attacks, and you have way more room at a lower speed to actually take off or land. In other words, you don't have to be landing at a very high speed of around 200 knots, which is really fast. You can land at a simple speed of 30 something knots quite easily with the existence of the flaps. And that is what they're all about. But still, the angle of attack is still there. It prevents it, yes, but it prevents a stall, but the tendency is still there. That is the issue, as well as in takeoff. And if you ask me, yes, that is one of the some of the worst case scenarios in your entire pilot career, losing your speed before landing or after takeoff, imagine. So now that we know about the pilot behavior on what should it do if to prevent one or even to recover from one. There could also be some external factors, unfortunately, and that is why you always have to be checking the walk around, which is the part before the flight where you have to check every single inch of the aircraft before you fly because there could be anything in there, or there could be a malfunction of a fuel tank breach, a fuel leak, or a tire explosion, or anything, and that could mean a catastrophic failure. And yeah, those are mostly the external factors on what should happen, such as ice. Ice, we don't control the weather, and dust. Yes, we don't control the environment as well. There could be a lot of pollution in the air or in the ground. And there could also be other contaminants that, yeah, unfortunately, you have to pay attention. You have to pay attention at all costs if you don't want to kill all of your passengers and yourself. So before we end, how how dangerous is actually a stall? Well, as I said before, it depends. If you're at a low altitude, it'll be more dangerous. But if you're at a high altitude, there's more opportunity to recover. But still, it is actually, quite dangerous, and every single pilot is trying to avoid it. And that is why you should always, but always keep an eye on the airspeed. The airspeed is what builds the entire industry of aviation. It's what builds the entire flight, and without it, you just don't fly. There's no use of flying if airspeed didn't exist in the universe. Because if it didn't exist, you wouldn't have, lift to actually gain altitude, and flight would be impossible. That is why just keep an eye on it. It's really, really important. It's always the biggest indicator that's always in the cockpit, other than the altitude or something else. But the airspeed is the most important factor of the aircraft, of any single aircraft, of any single object that can fly. Okay, and I wanted to end this that you should definitely try to. And I wanted to end this by letting you know that pilots must be trained to recover from these, not only to recover them, but also to prevent them, because you have an engine failure. That is like the number one thing you're looking for. You want to be as far away as possible from a stall, because if not, you're going to be in a critical situation, and you might as well not survive and not pass the tests or the training. And that is where I go, that airspeed is the most important part, the most important factor of every single flight, of every single aircraft, of every single part of the world. Everything related to flying, you always have to keep an eye on the airspeed. The airspeed is literally the most important thing. Like you don't have to worry about the engines, or if the engine starts or anything. If you have airspeed, you're good. You have time. You have time. You have air. You have distance. You have so much stuff that if you didn't have airspeed, but if you still have engines, you wouldn't. You won't have those privileges for that airspeed gives you. That is also another reason why I highly encourage you to subscribe, because this channel actually teaches you how to become a better pilot than you mostly are, even if you're in a simulator or anything. Even if you're in a fake world like Microsoft Flight Simulator or X-Plane, you still can learn from it, because it's a simulator. It's meant to replicate real life in a computer. And yeah, also to gain some knowledge of how aircraft work. And that is why if you subscribe, it will help you a lot more. for your knowledge of aviation. And I think that's it. So thank you so much for watching and see you on the next video.